What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is The Full Measure and I've recently returned to playing Destiny 2 and I've decided to bring out a series of videos highlighting guard rolls both in the PvE and PvP aspect for weapons that I like to use in the current season and probably in seasons to come. Today we're going to be looking at a legendary energy fusion rifle that was included in the latest expansion, the Witch Queen, and it's of course the Likely Suspect. Now this is also a craftable fusion rifle, which means that once you've unlocked the recipe, you are able to use the forge or foundry or whatever you want to call it to create the perfect version of this weapon, and then you simply have to level it up to get to those enhanced perks and everything that you can get from that. So as mentioned, the Likely Suspect is a special ammo void fusion rifle. Fusion rifles have always fit into a niche for me where I like to run them if I have a long range primary or kinetic weapon that I'm running, and this is a fantastic way for you to deal with major enemies. In other words, bosses you will save your power ammo for, and your special ammo you use to deal with chunkier enemies that don't go down to your primary weapon that easily. Now the Likely Suspect is a rapid fire frame, and as you can see from the stats on the screen right now, these are of course the base stats before we apply any kind of mods and sculpt this into a PvE or PvP weapon. You can see that it features fairly high handling, semi-decent stability, I would say. The range is not that great, and then the impact is also fairly substantial. Nothing too out of the ordinary here as to what we expect from fusion rifles, especially this archetype. And when we then look towards either using this in a PvE environment or a PvP, the bottom line is we want to accentuate the charge time being as fast as possible so you can get those shots out really quickly, and this is whether you are playing in a PvE environment or a PvP. And also we want to make the possibility of follow-up shots happening as fast as possible with the maximum amount of control and control over our recoil as well, so that we can actually land those shots. Now looking at PvP first this time, for our barrel, of course, we want to be using arrowhead break. Now our goal here is to actually get the bounce intensity, or let's call it the recoil of that first shot, because fusion rifles generally what they do is when you pull off that shot, it yanks the gun up like this. So we want to make it so that we want to have a barrel that makes it easier for you to control that, so that you can potentially land a follow-up shot if A, you miss, or B, you want to hit a second person if you're getting pushed by two people. Remember, we're building a PvP frame here now. So arrowhead break is definitely good for this because it increases your recoil control and also gives you a little bit of additional handling speed. When we move over to the battery here, accelerated coils I think is very good in PvP, because again in PvP the point is whoever starts shooting first and hits that first shot applies the pressure and has the initiative of the fight. And especially in cases of a fusion rifle where it can be one shot kill, the point is that you want to be sure that you are getting that first shot off, and so you want to be lowering your charge time as much as possible so you can simply spin the gun up and get that shot out as fast as possible. Now combined with some of the traits that we're going to look at, this will mean that in combination of accelerated coils and one of the traits we're going to pick means that follow-up shots come out even quicker, which means that if you for some reason miss a shot or you aren't able to down someone in one hit, then that follow-up shot should be able to seal the deal, and you can get that second shot out quicker if you actually down someone and you want to move over to the next person. Now for our first trait here, absolutely what we want to be using is perpetual motion. Perpetual motion by default is just really good because it gives you additional stability, handling, and reload speed as you are moving around. Now this is a PvP variant of this weapon, and generally speaking, standing still in PvP is a death sentence. Yeah, you could be standing and sniping and all of that, but generally you want to be moving, and so this trait just rewards you by being on the move, sliding, running, and just essentially, you know, cutting around corners and just staying mobile. And as long as you're doing that, you're getting all of these additional stats on there, which is fantastic because all of those stats make this weapon a lot better. Then moving on to our second trait, and this is what I was referring to when I was mentioning accelerated coils, is successful warm-up essentially says that each final blow increases charge and draw speed for an improved duration. That means that if you run into a situation where you duck into a room, two dudes are standing there waiting for you, you drop the first one with that hit of the fusion rifle, this means the recharge on the second shot will be that much quicker, and you could potentially net yourself 2 heads for the price of 1. So this is really powerful. I think this is a very decent combination that you can run together with accelerated coils. Now, our origin trait, of course, is Psycho Hack, which says that sustained damage from this weapon lowers the target's damage output. It's kind of like a little bit of like a damage debuff. I don't really see this having a massive effect in PvP, but it's not like we have other choices to pick here. So, you know, it is what it is. Now, the masterwork itself, generally speaking, one of the places where this weapon suffers a lot in is its range. Its range is super limited. So anything that you can do to actually increase this range is going to make a big difference. Stability by default is always a great stat for any weapon, but in cases where you have this limited range and where you might have to engage from a little bit further, especially in PvP where you can't always control the distance from which you fight at, you would need to just give yourself a little bit of a increase in range here. Now, for our mod slot, counterbalance stock works insanely well here, because again, what we said at the beginning when we picked arrowhead break is we're trying to crush this recoil, this bounce intensity as much as we can. And with a combination of arrowhead break and counterbalance stock, what we do is we reduce it to a bounce volume of 5. That is the total bounce that this weapon has, and that's almost perfect. I would say that's almost recoilless in a way, if you want to look at it that way. So this gives us a weapon that essentially then allows us to give those second follow-up shots with much more precision and able to land them and possibly kill something that didn't die the first time around, or a second person that charges you down. Then we gotta talk PvE, and actually this is my preferred place to use this weapon. I really like this fusion rifle in PvE, specifically due to the fact of the two traits that we can pair for PvE, which makes this thing a fucking monster with dealing damage to bosses in it, or rather mages or tougher enemies in a really short time. So first of all, with the barrel, same reason why we picked arrowhead break for PvP, we stick with that here as well. We want those follow-up shots to be as easy as possible to land, so we want to be reducing that recoil intensity, that bounce, as much as possible. Particle repeater, once again, the thing is now, because it's not a PvP situation and we're not so worried about landing that first shot, because otherwise we're going to get shot, we can rather look towards something like particle repeater, which increases the stability of the weapon by quite a bit. Now, does that mean that you can't use accelerated coils to just get that first shot off quicker? No, not at all. But in the cases of PvE, you're much better able to control the tempo of the engagements that you're doing, because you can choose to fight in whichever distance you want to fight at and whichever enemy you want to fight, whereas sometimes those choices are taken away from you in PvP. So the point is here, I rather want a weapon that's more stable, so I can make all of my ammo count for as much as possible, and so that I can be making sure that I hit as much of the fusion rifle burst and all of that stuff on enemies, and certainly stability helps us with this regard. Now, for our first trait, what we want to be taking is we want to be taking heating up. Now, heating up says that final blows with this weapon increase your accuracy and your stability while improving vertical recoil for a longer duration. This means that when your first kill goes off, now suddenly you have a massive increase to accuracy, your gun is like super stable, and your vertical recoil is now reduced, you know, by quite a bit. That means that now when we pair it with our secondary trait, or our trait 2, which is exactly the same trait from PvP, which is successful warm-up, now it means that you pull your first shot, it pulls up a little bit maybe, and then from then on it's just, and then you just it's like a laser, it just shoots in the same place the entire time. So this is ridiculously OP, especially if you unlock both enhanced perks with this, because it makes the duration of this last much longer, and so it's much easier for you to sustain this through an entire fight. This can be huge, especially if you want to chunk a whole bunch of damage on a tough enemy, or if you have 2 or 3 or 4 mages that are pushing you down, you can essentially use this to decimate the entire group. It is ridiculously OP, and I totally encourage any of you, if you haven't tried this combo, to try it out, because it feels super powerful. Then Psycho Hack is of course our origin here. So again, this is a 10% damage debuff on enemies that you hit, which in PvE is kind of cute. It means that if you are being pressured by something that's dealing a bunch of damage to you, you can chop some of that damage. You can chop 10% of that damage off by hitting the enemy with this weapon, and that debuff lasts for about 3 seconds, so you can keep on applying it as you keep hitting it with the fusion rifle. Now again, with the masterwork, the same reason why we picked range. in our PvP setup, we pick it in PvE as well. We have all the additional stability that we're getting from particle repeater already. So again, that just makes the argument even more for us to be able to use range on here. It means that we don't have to necessarily get into almost like melee range where, you know, knights and things like that can often be a problem and can one tap you on difficult content, so you can hit them from a little bit further away and still get that juicy damage. Now, specifically when it comes to the weapon mod here, as I've said, the fusion rifle for me fulfills a role where I have my primary, my kinetic weapon, which I use to kill trash. I have my power weapon, which I use to kill bosses or deal a lot of damage to bosses. And then so I want something that is good at dealing damage to the intermediate enemies, mages, non-bosses, but tough enemies. And this is definitely where this weapon shines. That then means, of course, that we want to be picking up major spec. And that's going to be it for the build as well as the video. Let me know how you would build your fusion rifle. I know that firmly planted is super popular as well, and I will not deny the strength that it has, but it requires a certain playstyle, meaning that you have to be cognizant of the idea that you need to be crouching to benefit from the effect of firmly planted, which is not generally a way that I play, and I kind of like don't remember to do that the whole time. So I figured, let me just take that off the board completely and play the weapon in a different way. But let me know how you would build it up. Give me some suggestions of other weapons that you would also like to see come to this format. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.